It is cold weather, and of course, if you were a wrestler wrestling in the cold weather, sweeping the nation, it's probably a pretty miserable time. So it's a good time to hop on a plane for a day, head across the world to the land down under, the land of plenty, where Jim Barnett once conquered. AEW finally.
Is that what they called that back then?
AEW finally hitting Australia.
Well, I don't know if they hit Australia or just slapped it in the face. So, and again, by the way, I was under the assumption that their big lead-in for the AEW Grand Slam was the NBA All-Star Game. I didn't know that it was just NBA All-Star Saturday night, and this is still going to be... It was a fucking dunk contest. They had a white guy about 5'11" jumping over cars and shit. It was highly entertaining. He might be the next AEW superstar. But it wasn't even the game. It was a bunch of people in a building watching. I guess they had various games and competitions, and the dunk contest was the main event of it, and it ran till about 10:50. But that's the biggest lead-in they're going to have all year, was the night before the game.
Well, again, the dunk contest is a pretty big deal, like the home run derby for baseball.
Well, but I mean, you wouldn't think it would be as big as some of the games that they actually fucking have on there.
All-Star games suck. All-Star games suck is the reality of 2025. But let me ask you this. Do you remember, because I don't, when those former wrestling fans who were watching the NBA stayed for AEW and saw Chris Jericho and went on Twitter and just attacked him?
Yes.
Was that the All-Star game, or was it just an NBA game?
It was an NBA game, because I remember people saying, like, NBA Twitter or something is a buzz over discovering Chris Jericho is still wrestling or something to that effect. But I think it was an NBA game and a bunch of NBA fans from the Attitude Era, and then all of a sudden Jericho was first. But at least they were a buzz, because they knew who he once was and who he still aspired to be, because they had a problem with that on this program. But to set the stage, I know we did this last week. Let's just run it down real quick, Brian. At first, this was announced instead of Grand Slam at the Arthur Ashe tennis facility there in New York, because they sold that out the first year and said they burnt that out. They announced a stadium in Australia. And we said at the time, what the fuck? Because what is their viewership in Australia that they believe they can do this? And a lot of our fans in Australia, good day, mates. They said, no, they're not available on any kind of widespread television. Wasn't that basically the summation of what everybody said? Was the people watch it, but not in numbers that one would think would fill a stadium, is what we heard.
What we heard from people was kind of a variation in different forms of, this is not a wrestling country, this is a WWE country. And they've been the only game in town, despite, independents that have done okay. There really isn't a large AEW exclusive audience. And the other thing is, AEW with Wembley, they announced Wembley and people said, how the hell are they going to get anyone in that stadium? And the first one, you got a lot of people there for a variety of reasons, dropped off year two. I guess you could understand why Tony would think maybe that would work in Australia, but it's a different kind of country, different layout. It's hard to get anywhere there.
Boy, that's almost even like saying, well, if it works in Chicago, will it work in fucking Knoxville? There's just a lot more people to pick from in general in one place. But nevertheless, so then things didn't look real good, in the way of filling a stadium, even with a partial setup, and they moved it indoors. But in the process, and again, we're willing to be corrected here, but I've seen people tweeting that it was on their the AEW official schedule at one point as a pay-per-view event. And the people thought they were getting a pay-per-view in a stadium. Then it was moved indoors, and then there were no big. Remember how that they built Wembley like they were building the goddamn Egyptian pyramid, but there hadn't been a lot of build for this bad boy.
And the other thing is
And
Grand Slam traditionally was Dynamite. It wasn't a pay-per-view and it wasn't a Collision. I mean, maybe they had matches roll over to Rampage and Collision, but Grand Slam was a Dynamite. This wasn't even that.
well, and that's where I'm going. They moved indoors. They did it ain't a pay-per-view. They haven't had any big matches built for it until they were farting them out as they usually do, the past few weeks for the most part. And then they get a Collision taping with Ring of Honor. A Ring of Honor and Collision tape at the highest prices that I bet you quite a few of these folks have ever paid for a wrestling ticket. Because they didn't. I mean, you can correct me, Brian, if you Google it, but I'm not sure they had quite at 10,000 people. And they still did over $1 million at the gate, which, and here's the thing. I want to know this because I don't think we delved deeply enough into this. For the initial people, when the stadium went on sale, didn't we hear that it was about 8 or 10,000 that bought tickets or whatever? Is this the same people? Did they just hold the tickets and make it good for the new building? Did they say turn your tickets back in and get new ones? How did they handle that transition?
I'm not exactly sure. I was under the impression it was kind of like WWF with WrestleMania 7 where they moved indoors even though they had already sold tickets for the LA Coliseum. They just found a way to reshuffle the arrangements so that everyone got something close to what they thought they were getting in the stadium.
So have you been able to find out any reporting on an honest basis of how many people they had in this indoor building?
Well, WrestleTix reports that the Brisbane Entertainment Center listed the capacity as 13,500. The venue has 11,000 tiered seats. And AEW, as of this email, only had 665 tickets available. So it sounds like they were in the range of 12 to 13,000.
Okay, but I guess what I'm saying is that everybody that had bought tickets to the stadium and just switched over? Has there been any real movement since then? And I'm not talking even about tickets distributed, which is probably what WrestleTix would have. I'm talking, did they actually sell any new ones? Because they ended up doing a show that they had booked in a 70,000 seat stadium set up for 40 to 50,000 that fit into a building that holds 13,000 tops. Is where we went with that.
Well, the other thing was, what if the stadium had worked out? What if they had sold 50,000 tickets? Was this the card they were going to do? Was it going to be just a short Collision and then Ring of Honor in a stadium?
No, if they had
MJF wasn't there. I mean, how many other wrestlers didn't make the trip? I didn't see MJF on this show.
If they had 30,000 tickets sold 2 months ago, you'd have seen a lot more of what you saw there. So that basically they ended up with a Collision and a Ring of Honor taping with the highest prices ever in a small building from a stadium. And so I think they thought that they would make up for it in Tony's mind, they being Tony, with the high spot matches and the craziness without even any of the bad interviews or fucking filler of a regular television show. So it was a good display of what AEW is, but I'm not sure that that's what they would need for their biggest audience, or at least the biggest audience at the start. We'll find out, I guess, hopefully very soon how far they fell. But it looked good, the crowd indoors, compared to some of the ones they've had here domestically lately. But should we go ahead and, before we talk about the show, talk about the ring controversy? Might as well get that out of the way.
I mean, it was one of the first things people noticed. We started seeing photos go around before we saw any of the actual matches or anything. People noticed that the ring was smaller. Reports said that it may have been 16 by 16, which is pretty small. They had problems fitting the aprons on, obviously, because the ring was smaller. I saw an image with like a step stool instead of ring steps. They had a step stool to get people in and out of the ring. I mean, Tony's the same guy that throws money. He just put Rita Chatterton under contract and brought her into Jaguars games. He has money up the gazoo, and he'll spend it. They didn't want to bring their own ring?
Well, and again, if you're running a business and you're running one show in Australia and you could find a local ring instead of goddamn either putting one on a boat for 3 months or whatever that process is, or flying a goddamn wrestling ring to Australia, if you're running a business, yes, you would try to find something over there that would serve. But for the same guy that fucking spends as much money as it would cost to have one built over there and fucking polished and the post powder coated and shipped in there and put up by naked hookers, he spends that much money on Danielson's entrance music for a pay-per-view. So what? It's hard to hold these folks to the similar standards, but I didn't. Go ahead.
No, you could go ahead. I was going to bring up the Buddy Matthews tweet, but I'll do it after you talk about this.
Well, okay, because I want to know more about, because I saw him limping, but I thought he'd been selling his knee from some crazy thing that he did a second before that. But nevertheless, the ring was a normal fucking ring. That's what people are so used to seeing. All the WWF, it shows goddamn Netflix trailers on an LED screen on all 4 ring posts, and everything's lit up and lightning flies out of everybody's ass. And with AEW, they do dress up as well, but this was a regular fucking probably Australian indie ring. The ropes were nice. They had the AEW turnbuckle pads. The ring posts were neither painted any fancy colors nor particularly straight, because they had the square posts that bend without the angle iron on the outside, or making a 6-inch round post that won't bend unless you hit it with a 18-wheeler. But I digress. I didn't take a bump in it, but I saw it had some give. The mat didn't look too bad. Apparently the apron skirts, what everybody's freaking out about is, I hadn't even really noticed or paid attention, but it looked like it was an 18 by 18 foot ring, the same as an old WCW ring or any of the territory rings from the days of the territories, except for WWF and Vern. They always used a 20-foot ring, and Sheik and Kobo had a 24-foot boxing ring. We got to ask fucking Supermouth Dave Drayson why that was sometime. That's one thing I've never thought to ask him. But this was just a regular size fucking ring. Maybe it looked even smaller because they were actually in a big building with people in it.
Well, again, people were saying 16 by 16. It looked really small. It looked like the ring from the ICW studio.
No, I've
Two
seen
steps and you can run the
16 by
ropes.
16-foot rings, and that was bigger than that. I mean, 16 by 16 is fucking embarrassing. You can take 2 steps and hit the other side.
Obviously, we'll review the match later on, but Buddy Matthews tweeted out, so thoughts after AEW Grand Slam Australia? If it wasn't a 16 by 16 shit wrestling ring, I wouldn't have destroyed my ankle on the entrance due to holes in the padding.
Okay.
Okada wouldn't have been able to put his foot on the rope, and I'd be champion. Shit happens. Now again, he said 16 by 16, but saying he destroyed his ankle due to holes in the padding, what does that mean?
Well, that means that they had shit padding. And that's the same way that I tore my left ACL in Philadelphia, and because the padding was separated. There was a crack where if you put your foot down in the wrong place, you can roll your ankle, or your knee can go sideways or whatever. But that on one of the nice rings these days, whether it be AEW or WWE or, the standardized big companies, they actually, in the old days, you got fucking indoor-outdoor carpeting rolled off a goddamn trailer that was exposed to rain and snow, was the padding for the ring. But now they have that, what do you call it, composite material, but it comes in rolls, and they roll it all the way across, and it's seamless in that respect. And then it's also straight so they can tape it down where the rolls meet and you don't have any holes or dips or valleys where if you plant your foot wrong, you're fucking yourself up. Apparently, they have not in Australia invested in that type of material yet. If he had a hole in the ring, that's what that means. But truthfully, as I said earlier, I had seen him limping, but I thought that he was doing something from selling something from a movie he had just done. It might have hurt himself too. But did he say he did it on the entrance?
Yeah, he did it at the beginning.
Gee, and still got through, and still was more impressive than fucking Okada. Holy shit. Well, any update on the injury or whatever? He said more soon.
Ankle injury, more information soon. Apparently, he was enjoying his honeymoon with Rhea Ripley while they were in Australia. So he's out and about and hopefully healing up. But there are photos. Well, I guess that's how we know that. There are photos of them hanging out and he has a crutch.
Well, yeah. Well, now don't call her that.
I'm talking about the crutch.
He can get over on his own merits.
No, I'm not saying she's the crutch. How dare you? I'm saying he has a crutch.
Well, I'm saying don't say you sounded like he's out and about. He's hopping around on one leg, but he wasn't going to let that interfere with his nuptiations.
You think Hoppy's a better name than Buddy?
It would almost have to be, wouldn't it? But anyway, so here's what was wrong with this program. At the top, they've got the big lead in from the NBA festivities and the fucking 5'11" white guy jumping over the cars and shit. That was entertaining as fuck. But nevertheless, so as you referred to Jericho a few minutes ago, when it was a few years ago, it was a big NBA game or whatever, and then they boom, and the Twitter lit up. Jericho's still wrestling, but at least there was some buzz, we know this guy. He used to be so-and-so. What they did here was what I termed the other day basically the preacher selling the religion to the choir, in that they came on the air with the big trained chimpanzee high spot video game match with everybody getting an individual entrance that they took their time on because of the big crowd, to the point where they rang the bell for the tag team match 10 minutes into the show. And their big lead in was the first thing they saw was our friend Take a Shit. Long and then Kyle Felcher. And then Osprey, and took his time. And then the Second Coming. The music and the lighting and the pyro and the drama and the time consumption. And then it's still just Kenny. And out comes Kenny. And they rang the bell 10 minutes into the show, and they had the big lead in and spent 10 minutes on people walking to the ring that none of those fucking people that were watching had ever heard of before. Am I lying? Or am I lying?
Are you lying or are you lying?
Or am I? Then you just answer the question.
Your feet are off the ground, obviously.
Yeah, just answer the question.
I think
don't try to dodge this issue.
The only one they could possibly know would be Kenny Omega, based on being on AEW TV, on TNT or TBS for the last 5 years.
But if it's supposedly bringing them a brand new and much bigger audience, a lot of those people ain't been watching Kenny on AEW on TNT for the last 5 years.
Well, based on who was on this show, who would you have started out with? Not adding people that weren't on it, because we don't know who went to Australia and who didn't.
Well, based on who was on this show, I believe I would have slunk off in the corner in shame.
So you see, you had to pick something.
But...
I'm watching this.
I mean, at least, here's the thing. Edge, they would have known who Edge was, but then they had a Brisbane brawl with the ratings killers. So I guess maybe you're right.
I have it on in the background to watch it a second time while we're reviewing it. My DVR, the first 20 minutes of the NBA dunk contest. You got to wonder how many people DVR'd this major event from Australia and didn't get the last 20 minutes because of how it worked. I think this ring is smaller than a WCW ring. I mean, I could be wrong, and you were in the rings, but this ring...
I was looking at a big screen television.
And these are little guys. I mean, but no, actually, Takeshi and Fletcher aren't that small. I think it may be 16 by 16.
It may be. Okay. Then if you think so, then I'll tap out. Because when I heard I didn't notice anything. And then when I heard about the controversy, I went back and looked and, but at the same point.
WCW was 18 by 18?
Oh, yeah. All rings pretty much everywhere were 18 by 18. And then I'm trying to think. I mean, like I said, Vern Gagne, most of his were, maybe some smaller shows would have been different, but most of his were 20 by 20, and they always used them in the WWF. And I think the first time I was ever actually in a 20 by 20 foot ring was when I came up to do a show for Dennis Coralluzzo in a New Jersey ring.
I like the old 40 by 40 foot rings at the Olympic Auditorium.
Well, but they had such a wonderful apron. You could, paint a line down the middle and have traffic going both ways. But anyway, back to this, the match, the tag team match. It was the dream match of all the people who like that kind of fucking thing. And it's like, fucking Pavarotti for me trying to put up with Milli Vanilli watching it. 100 miles an hour back and forth with moves. Not talking about selling like people are dead, but I'm talking about the selling and or registering. I've mentioned the trading of blows where they're punching each other in the side of the head and nobody's facial expression changes. But no facials, no selling, no registering, no logic, no psychology. Nobody's following any rules. The referee wasn't just buried, he was encased in concrete like he'd crossed Capone. At various points, two guys would just roll out of the ring and hide behind the apron until their cue came up. The 4 ways minutes, as a matter of fact, I think did I make some notes here? Well, I don't want to get ahead of myself. But early on, they've just got to do this shit because they don't know what else to fucking do. The baby faces, Kenny and Willie, did the double dive out of the ring on opposite sides, but they took so long. They had to get down on their knees and drum the mat to get the people fired up, and then stand up and point and gesticulate, and then run the opposite way. And there's the two heels standing there slack-jawed, gape-mouthed, wide-eyed, waiting to catch them. The whole bill, even if they're not on TV camera, the whole building is looking at these numbnuts is just standing there waiting. Oh, here he comes. The fuck? It's a goddamn embarrassment. There's no heels. There's no baby faces. At one point, Kyle just cut both of the alleged baby faces off by himself without even cheating. Just boom, here you go. Boom, throw you into this guy. Shit, can you now? It's over and over. But in between is the awkward shit, the sloppy work, the rotten basics, the stuff that looks phony, the obvious cooperation. It's like a routine by gymnasts on America's Got Talent. And then they all pose and point and turn their back on their opponent. If I was breaking this down in wrestling school, it would be a multi-part series with 2 hours each day to point out the basic shit that these numbnuts either ignore, can't get, or were never taught. And I don't understand how it's gotten this far with nobody correcting them all somehow, that if you just apply all this athleticism to do something else besides pretend you're in a fucking video game, then you would prosper with much farther in this industry. Because if they ever go, of course, now they got a billionaire paying them whether they draw or not, so they don't care. But if they were to ever go to the WWE system and become legitimate stars in wrestling, they would have to be completely retrained. For Kenny, that's why he's where he is, because it's too fucking late. For Osprey, I think he liked the idea of living in England and commuting. For poor Take a Shit, he was probably wrapped up because the offices were working together and his knowledge of the American wrestling scene may not be up to par. And it was the other fellow, Kyle. He's the one, because he's youngest, he's got the most potential. The more he does this type of thing here, the harder it's going to be when he ever makes it to NXT. But physically, he can do this shit. The heels out wrestle the faces at every turn. But it wasn't so bad because you can't tell which is which by the work. And then, oh, here we go. The last 11 minutes of the match, Brian, guess what they didn't do?
Make any tags?
Correct. You are correct, sir. They did a tag at one point, and there was not another tag for the last 11 minutes of the match. It was either a constant choreographed four-way in and out at will in front of the referee, or two of the guys hiding behind the fucking apron, and then they just roll in at the appropriate point. And finally, Kenny and Willie won. For the type of people who like that kind of thing, that's the kind of thing those people like. They sure do just jump around with a lot of energy and enthusiasm. For anybody who's ever worked in the wrestling industry in a booking or training or any capacity for any length of time before this mental illness took over, it was maybe the worst tag team match ever on television. Am I being too harsh?
I mean, you're very, very harsh on this match.
Well, it's just, they don't even try. They don't even try.
They are... until they get to WWE,
and one of the heels was a hometown hero. Kyle's from Australia, so what the?
Until they get to WWE and are told to work a different way by the people paying them, they're going to keep doing what they want to do and what their instincts tell them to do. And you brought up the spot with Kyle Fletcher before, making his own comeback against both guys. He's the heel without cheating. The spot where they did the double dives and you just see Takeshita on the floor looking up, waiting.
Yes.
When is this going to happen? Like, he looks bored. This is their style. This is the AEW style. And that's why if you watch the match, if you listen to the match, you got moments with big pops surrounded by moments where everyone sat there waiting for the next big pop.
Yeah.
And, you know, again, we'll see what happens. I think Takeshita, I think all four of these guys in their own way are great for it. I shouldn't even say great for AEW. Takeshita needs to get out of there. Fletcher needs to get out of there. Ospreay is just going to do his own thing until whenever, until his body's broken down. And Kenny Omega's probably the preeminent AEW star, but Don Callis sucks as a manager. By the way, the commentary sucked. Got to bring that up too.
Well, yeah,
but I didn't think it was the worst thing in the world.
But again, it also is Don Callis the only manager ever in history that only sits at the announce desk and never stands up unless he's going to go to the ring and interfere?
Well, he's the only manager there that's buddies with Chris Jericho and Kenny Omega. I mean, he was a favor hire to begin with, and he is not a serious manager. WWE is Paul Heyman. Everyone takes him serious. They've got a guy playing the role of he's like an indie manager. You would see him on a dentist show.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's the state of things.
How many tickets did you sell, Don? Okay, you can manage someone. That's what it would be.
But you mentioned the overall the commentary, even though it was rotten. I said it wasn't as rotten as it normally is because these people, they didn't even get the A announce team. They didn't even get Taz and Shivani and Sockface. They got Shivani and Nigel. Which Nigel's probably, if he was unfettered and alone, the best of the bunch of them. But they didn't even get the A team there. They had to be thinking, what the fuck? And then I was wondering if Tony even made the trip, but I understand he went out in front of the live crowd and got shit booed out of him.
Yeah, they booed him. Because look at what happened. They thought they were getting a big Australian AEW event. Whoever, even if it's not a stadium, 13,000 people thought they were going to get a big AEW event. How many people weren't there? How many people weren't flown over? The ring wasn't flown over. And then you get a makeshift collision / Ring of Honor. You can't bring the ring over, but you can bring over the Ring of Honor crew?
Well, they had no Ring of Honor. They only had Ring of Ill Repute. All right, should we move on to the women's title match, the big showdown between Mercedes Moon and Australia's own Harley Cameron, the daughter of the legendary Dave Cameron, the historian of...
No relation. He's in New Zealand. Relation.
Well, it's not that far, right? They had to take boats back in the day in order to mate with people in nearby locations.
Well, I mean, technically they took a boat to get to Australia originally, but again,
that's why the sheep were so nervous out there in those days.
Harley Cameron's, again, it's a silly comedy act, and I think she's really talented. I'd love to see her, on the Stephen Colbert show or something, not here. But they have successfully gotten her, through exposure to her, over. She may not be talented in the ring, but she is over with their fans right now.
Well, and she was even over on TV here on the build to this over the last couple of weeks without being in her home country. And then they go to Australia in a big crowd in their home country. And I'm thinking, is this the time where maybe they might realize, let's get something out of the... I think we agreed the other day, Mercedes, for the money spent and the ballyhoo, was the biggest female flop that they've ever flopped here in AEW. So could they put the new phenomenon over and get, something out of this thing? But they didn't do that, did they? and here's the thing: the match, like you said, Harley is not. It was like two drunk strippers watched a tape of a wrestling match and tried to imitate it. There's no leader here. I know Mercedes is trying to tell her things to do that she thinks might be wise to do, but we've seen what her matches look like a lot of times, and to me, it came down to Harley's not good, but at least people like her, where Mercedes is rotten and nobody's caring. So, besides the fact that this was kind of phony looking because they try to do too much out of their depth, and Harley was using the puppet to come off the top rope for whatever, but they didn't even use the puppet creatively. At one point, Mercedes football kicked it, but otherwise, Harley was just waving it around like it was a pom-pom. She could have fucking stuck her hand up the fucking puppet and then had the puppet fucking grab Mercedes in the crotch or something. I don't know.
I don't know if that would have worked on TNT.
Well, but it was late at night. But well, you can't deny that.
I don't know if TNT changes their standards that much late.
Well, it's late night. It's Playboy After Dark, baby. It's not the family hour anymore. We can let our freak flag fly.
That's right. Back to Electric Blue.
Yes, well, back to it is finally it wouldn't end until Mercedes hit that shitty finish that she does and beat Harley 1, 2, 3 also. So what is... Mildred Burke going to have to come back from the grave to end this winning streak of this obviously egotistical young flopola? Just an honest question I ask of you.
I mean, Tony's happy with Mercedes Moné. And yeah, I don't know what to say about the women's division. They have some talent there, but it's never going to work when you just throw them on in the middle of the show when there are other matches that people care for. Harley Cameron's gotten herself over with the puppet. I know it's not an easy thing to do, but they should sell the fucking puppet. Just have them everywhere, but merch is not necessarily their strong suit. But take advantage of this. Right now, if WWE had Harley Cameron and all of a sudden they discovered she's a ventriloquist and it got over, there'd be merch up the gazoo already. Is there anything from AEW? I don't know. She didn't win. AEW is on a a run of disappointing finishes. And I'm not just saying the good guy has to win, and Tony Storm got a big win, and they really like that. But between Harley not winning and the way Cope lost, there was enough here to deflate people. You know what I mean? Just like, okay, I've seen
that fucking Cope. Let's not blame him. The Dick the Boozer match, which we'll get to, was that was the wrestling equivalent of a tranquilizer dart. Just took the fucking energy out of everybody. Oh, well, anyway, yes, Mercedes won, didn't she?
Mercedes Moné did win. She is still the, no, the other one's the women's. She's the TNT champion. And
she's got like 4 belts or whatever.
Well, only one of them is recognized or official.
No, believe me, she's got 4 belts, but nobody recognizes any of them. Like, what's that?
So Harley Cameron, not necessarily someone who's a wrestler. Someone told me her husband is an athlete who was signed to WWE and that she came over here with him. And that's kind of what her introduction to wrestling was. So not someone with any sort of background or interest in being in it, but got into it. And she has talent. She could sing, play guitar, and play with puppets. Is that someone WWE should be interested in, or would they say, no, stay in AEW?
Well, no. I wonder why that she didn't, if her husband, boyfriend, significant other, whatever was involved with the WWE system, why they didn't get involved with her at the beginning, or maybe they did, or maybe she wasn't interested then and chose another path or whatever, but she probably would have been better served in NXT, because if the only perspective she has on wrestling is what she sees behind the scenes and or in the ring in AEW, she's going to have a long road to hoe, as Mama Cornette used to say, if she wants to continue in the big leagues and go through NXT. If she at least got in that system first, she'd still have a limited understanding of wrestling, but she would have a better understanding of what the fuck, how to separate business from all of this tomfoolery. Does that make any sense?
It does make some sense. And again, Harley Cameron, getting over, talented, has her puppets. If AEW isn't going to sell them, maybe she could sell them herself, set up an online store, make a bunch of money, control her destiny with Shopify.
I can hear it right now. I can hear the cash register ringing and ka-chinging, and Harley Cameron, she could sell her puppets. She could sell anything she's had her hand stuck halfway up into the elbow in. And she could own all of her property, all of her intellectual property, and run her own business. But you still need help, folks. Even if you're an entrepreneur and you got the idea and you got the drive and the determination, you need the platform. You need somebody to help you out and navigate the interwebs and the wide world of commerce. Now that we're a global entity around the world with the interwebs, you need somebody like Shopify, home of the #1 checkout on the planet. Shop Pay that boosts conversions. Way less carts going abandoned, and a cart is a terrible thing to waste, ladies and gentlemen. And way more of the sales going ka-ching. That means money. That means dinero. That means pesos. That means moolah. Not the female kind. You can pay for younger women. But it means financial recompense to you in your pocket if you're growing your business. Your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are. Whether it's on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between, from feelings to follicles. And businesses that sell more sell on Shopify because they take the novice, they take the idea, they take the concept, and boom goes the dynamite. They make it become a reality. Brian, you have seen, as a matter of fact, this guy had an idea for a theme park, Pisney World. And over the course of a weekend, down there in Delray Beach, they built this guy an amusement park. And now he's He's letting children come in for a quarter a head.
I don't know what
they
the hell you're
talking about. They can stay there all day.
In Delray Beach, Disney World. I don't know what.
Well, he had to be far enough away from Orlando they couldn't see the sign. But right now, folks, you can upgrade your business and get the same kind of checkout and platform as the big boys use, and it's only going to cost you $1 a month. How can you do this, you say to yourself? Well, you don't say it yourself, or elsewise you'd be not using the word you. You say it to me. How can you do this? Or how can they do this? Who's doing this? Let me clarify this. Shopify is going to give you a $1 a month trial period if you go to shopify.com/JCE. That's all lowercase there, the JCE. Again, it's an important thing to them, so I went along with it. Shopify.com/JCE to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com, have I repeated this enough, /JCE. And boom, you're going to be farting through silk and swimming in Scrooge McDuck's money bin. Unless, of course, your business that you're wanting to get into is illegal, in which case they'll give you another website you need to go to.
No, they will not. They will have nothing
about it there.
No, they won't tell you anything, and you could talk about that by yourself.
That's right. You know, you'll have no recollection of it afterwards. That's what the courts say.
They will not say anything because these conversations won't happen, but you'll be selling lots of stuff with Shopify. One more time, what's that? Promo code Jim.
Oh, I thought you wanted to hear this one more time. The promo code is JCE.
All right, you know what that means. We're back to Australia.
Well, here came Edge. And this was, again, I said at the top of the program, they should have led with somebody that maybe the new audience might know that at the same time would still mean something to the AEW crowd. Edge would have been the guy, but this brutal, rotten, indie garbage match that he was involved in would have driven people off the fucking show like women and children off the deck of the Titanic. But he was over. The fans sang his song. When the music cut off, they continued singing to him. And they know him, and he's been a star for a while, even though, you know, he now looks like Dan Haggerty's elderly uncle. And then here came Jay White, and, well, there came Jay White, but he's over there because he's one of those folk. Where is he from?
I think he may be New Zealand also.
He is. So again, you know, they're close to home. They don't have the loyalty the Samoans do, but still.
Where's Old Zealand?
Well, it's under the sea. It's next to Atlantis. That's why they had to make a new one. The other one sank. And then here came Dick the Boozer and the Boar Horseman through the crowd. And they're having a Brisbane brawl with no disqualifications, no countouts, no tags. They even said no tags. How was that different from the last match they just had? Where they could have been counted out many times but weren't. They could have been disqualified but weren't. They had no tags. And the fight on this one started on the floor. And they fought in the entranceway. And they fought through the arena. And they fought into the stands. And they fought in the trenches. And they fought on the front line. But it's the same shit they always do. And the pace on this was somewhat glacial. And then we found out, and I'm trying to think, there was a place we went for a Ring of Honor show. It is 15 years ago. I want to say, was it Canada or whatever the fuck, where they couldn't find any tables. And I mean, there were panicked faces like, oh my God, we can't have a wrestling show without tables amongst the wrestlers, believe it or not. Because the tables that are broken in wrestling, have we ever talked about the measurements, Brian, of the tables that they break?
I don't think so, no.
Okay, they're I call them lunchroom tables because that's what, when I was a kid, the foldy leg tables that you see everybody slide in the ring and set up, they'd set it up in the lunchroom or in the gym or whatever if you were having the pizza party. But the tables that get broken are 8-foot tables. And now that you have heard that, can you visualize when a guy's stretched out on it, his head maybe almost goes to the top, his feet almost go to the bottom, right?
Right.
Because an 8-foot table, when you hit it with a weight in the middle of it, in the sweet spot, it'll break clean and potentially safely. But if that table is 6 feet long, and that's what, with the Ring of Honor show I was talking about, I think all they could find were 4-foot tables. Your sweet spot almost ain't there. The closer in that the legs are to the middle of the table, the sturdier it's going to be, the less it's going to, or the more it's going to take to break it, the less likely it is to break in the middle. You get my drift here. And when they pulled at least one of the tables I saw out, it looks like Australia has like 5-foot tables, maybe 6, but they were also thin. When Edge got power bombed through off the apron, I think, in this match through one of those tables, and it looked like he got power bombed through a fucking cardboard box from Uline. It just snapped like balsa wood, like chopsticks. The point is, in other countries, they have other office supplies with other measurements, and maybe they're on the metric system over there. I don't know what's going on, but did you notice the tables were a little flimsy? When they put, I can't remember who, I think Kyle laid on it for a minute. It looked like it was going to break in half just from the guy laying on it. Anyway, yeah, flimsy table break. Just random notes. Moxley shit looks so fake. The power bomb through a table was the break spot. When they came back, nothing was really happening. Then Edge made a comeback, and Moxley stopped him. And then Jay White made a comeback with a kendo stick, and they stopped him. The Road Warriors sold like Ricky Morton compared to these fucking heels. And then Wheeler, old Wheelie boy, he just rolled in and started whipping people with a belt. And then Edge speared what's he through the fucking table, and Claudio, and speared Moxley. And then Edge pulled out a barbed wire chair, a chair wrapped in barbed wire, and hit Moxley with it. Is it worth Brian stopping and taking a moment to pump the brakes and ask this question again, since it's been a couple years since I did the last time? What the fuck application does a chair wrapped in barbed wire have in real civilian life?
Well, there is none. We're supposed to assume that the wrestler left it there knowing that he'll need it, not that it was something that happened to be there, I guess.
Well, but again, so now guys are allowed to put their own personal weapons under it's so stupid. The whole idea of the chair shot to begin with, in an arena, in a wrestling arena with spectators, there are chairs around and something you'd grab and pick up in a fight. If it's something that could be under the ring, I can go for a chair. I can go for a board. I could go for an extra turnbuckle. I go for a toolbox, fire extinguisher. But a chair wrapped in barbed wire, for any normal person, of course there are none, but any normal person that was watching this show would go, what the fuck is the matter with these people? It's just so stupid. And then Marina Schaefer, oh god damn it, somebody had a wonderful nickname for that we ought to start calling her. On that they tweeted, and now I've forgotten what it was. I just remember saying I should fucking write that down. Then I didn't write it down. But Marina Schaefer hit Edge with the briefcase, but not really, because she missed him. But he sold it, and Moxley got the choke on him, and everything came to a halt. There was no motion. It took forever. all of the extra people, the heels that weren't in the match, were holding Edge's solitary partner away from making any kind of a save. And then the referee rang the bell. And the crowd booed, not in the way of, boo, we hate you, you heel. It was like, boo, that's the fucking finish. And it was a garbage match with a rotten finish. And then, before you comment, when Moxley kept choking Edge, the crowd started chanting bullshit. Like, because it was going nowhere. And then Moxley jumps up like a maniac running around, cussed and got bleeped, whatever he said. And then the heels wandered around while Moxley acted like a tough guy and flipped everybody the fucking bird. And it was like garbage championship wrestling with a budget. And after all the other self-inflicted wounds and bad booking decisions, it may be this fucking low-class clown that kills this whole thing and just runs everybody off. He is the worst wrestler in the world. I'm sorry, please give me your feedback. I've droned on for too long.
You didn't know this. I literally was going to begin by saying Jon Moxley is the worst wrestler in the world.
Well, I'm sorry I stole your material.
When I first said that several years ago, we would still hear a lot of pushback. Can you imagine how crazy Cornette and Last are? They think Moxley sucks. Everyone sees it now. His ideas are terrible. His work is terrible. The fact that they're putting over so strongly a heel team that the fans reject. This isn't heat. Chanting bullshit isn't heat here. It is the fans are sick of this with Moxley, him choking people out, killing people. The other thing that's scarier is what this could mean. Moxley and Edge are about to wrestle at the AEW pay-per-view coming up. Edge just got choked out. Does that mean he's going to win? Which scares me, because if he wins the title, first of all, I wouldn't make him the world champion right now. But second of all, does that mean Christian's going to cash in right away? I mean, there's all these dynamics, none of them are good. The world champion is Moxley. You never see the belt. And it's like a vacancy at the top of the card right now. They've killed every single segment they've been in ratings-wise. Tony has put them, if you notice, over the last 3 months, Tony has put the Death Riders in every quarter of the show. Just trying to find any place where they won't drive people away. It's impossible. The Death Rider stuff is only good to Jon Moxley because he's a wrestling moron. He knows what he likes, he knows what he wants to be, but he doesn't know what people want and what people want him to be. Terrible match. Terrible. I said it the other day, none of these people are marketable. They just put out a white t-shirt that says Death Riders at the bottom, apparently, that they're selling. It's just bad. And I don't think anyone wants to see Edge. He got a great reaction here. It was a wonderful moment with everyone singing his song because the Australian fans are happy to see him. But his run in AEW has been awful. And against the Death Riders has been god-awful.
If he's about to wrestle for the AEW world title and at least many of the AEW faithful are on board with that, right? How old is Edge? Is it 53? I'm trying to remember. You might be able to Google it, but the point of the matter is that wasn't it just a few weeks ago that Uncle Dave was saying, well, about Shelton Benjamin, I don't know, pushing a guy that was 49 years old and wasn't used real well on TV in the WWE
51.
A few years ago.
Edge is 51.
Okay, Edge is 51. Look at Edge at 51 next to Shelton Benjamin at 49. Tell me who might ought to be the world champion between the two of them.
Well, that was that match, Jim. And of course, there was still more to go, but the fans were pretty deflated by this point. AEW Grand Slam.
Yes, they looked like one of those wind socks in a calm wind at the airport. The international title was on the line. Is that the international title? The intercontinental, continental title? One of the titles was on the line.
Yes, it is. The other one's the continental, yes.
It was Okada, versus Buddy Matthews. And we mentioned it earlier in the program. This is where Buddy injured his ankle apparently in this ring. And again, I thought that I didn't catch it because it was on the entrance, and he made it through this whole match and was the most impressive guy in the match. And I'd seen him limping at one point, but since then he was doing a running spot. I was like, oh, he was selling what he was doing before, but he's just apparently a tough fucking guy. But it's insulting to Buddy, as hard as he works and as much as he tries to get his shit over, to have to work with a fucking lazy ass piece of shit like Okada. Be quite honest with you. I'm just being honest. Instead of recounting the matches and the endless blow by blow description, here's what I'm saying as a person who has been involved in training programs and talent scouting and fucking development, invented developmental, for fuck's sake. Because that's what I was going to say. Stacy was watching part of this thing with me. And I said to her, I said, look at this guy. I said, am I overly critical? Am I biased? Look at this guy and his appearance in the ring and his work that he is exhibiting, and tell me, would he have stood out in an Ohio Valley wrestling class? And she said, no, he's the shits. And she reminded me of who he works like. Do you know who Okada works like?
I have no idea.
David Flair.
Oh, come on.
No, bless him.
Come on. No,
bless him. He was a heck of a nice kid, but David Flair didn't get it. And that's when Okada, he's soft, he's bland, he's slow, he's boring. He's obviously not working any harder than he has to at any point. And there's no charisma. There's no look. There's no, what the fuck? If I said Mercedes was the most expensive female flop that Tony's ever purchased, the men's title has to go to Okada. He looks like a Japanese Elon Musk. And his shit is unwatchable. Did you see the elbow fall off the top rope? He didn't drop it. He just fell. It's Buddy's from over there, down under, with the Vegemite and all that type of stuff. Can you hear the thunder? You better run. You better take cover. They want to see him do something. The fans were with him. And again, he's doing all this shit with one foot. And finally, Buddy hit a superplex and a jackhammer and got a 2 count. And he got Rhea's cloverleaf. And Okada rolled through, kicked him in the balls, hit him with that shitty clothesline, and beat him 1, 2, 3. Here's this jacked up beast hitting this fucking slight built Japanese businessman looking fuck with all these big moves, and Okada wins with a shitty clothesline that only got over because Buddy took a hell of a bump for it. And what the fuck is, at some point, do you not say to yourself, I can't believe that I paid what I paid for what I'm staring at on this monitor with my own eyes, and I need to either tell him start working hard if he can, or phasing him out and get somebody over with his name while he's still got one. I think Ibushi'd be better than Okada, and he had his feet amputated, right?
Let's not go crazy. Ibushi may be past the point of no return. You know, Okada has not been impressive in AEW. At one point, you want to talk about the ring. At one point, he did the move. He hit the mat and he tried to roll out. And he got caught on the bottom rope. Because I guess the ropes are lower than they are usually. He couldn't just roll out of the ring. He got caught in the rope. Buddy Matthews has a great look. Has an awful name. Was in front of a hometown crowd. You could say the same thing about Harley Cameron. in terms of being in front of a hometown crowd. Now, they got the Tony Storm match, but there was a lot of things in between that deflated people, like this match. You're paying Okada all this money. Tony Khan could do it. I'm not even going to blame him for that. He could do it. He doesn't have to care. But if you could recognize what's happening, maybe it was worth it to kind of try to do something here and give Buddy a big win. Roll the dice. See if you can get something out of any of this. Because otherwise, Okada just won another match. He's kind of a nothing champion. He's got nothing going on. He's virtually done nothing since the Bucks haven't been on TV.
Well, I was about to say, his group, his cohorts in crime, they just went home because they weren't over and it was embarrassing them to go on TV and flop. So they just went home to get paid and left him standing around doing interviews where the only word he can say in English is bitch and having these slow ass, fucking shitty matches. And what can he be involved in?
I don't think AEW can push people based off reputation. It has to be based on what they bring to the table right now. That has to be the way AEW deals with things. Capitalize on the moment, jump on things that work, try to make something work, not just keep doing what you're doing. Moxley's the world champion. People hate him. They hate watching him. The Continental Champion is Okada. He's not lighting the world on fire. The International Champion, is that still Takeshita?
I believe so.
He just lost in a tag team. I mean, just none of the champions are the right guys or presented well. But yeah, he beat Buddy Matthews here. This was a chance to, even though he's hurt and we now know that, if they had put Buddy over here, maybe you have a chance of having someone who could be a bit of a star for you.
Well, but and that's another reason. Why is he wrestling for a singles title when they have just the leader of the group that he was in, that he was really presented as the third place guy in, has just left the company. So they repackaged him and Brody King as a tag team, and then
beat them right away.
They lost their first tag team match on Dynamite, and then they put Buddy in as a single, wrestling for a title, and he gets beat too. So what? Anyway.
Well, that was that match, but if there was ever a time to do something, that was it.
We wish him a speedy recovery so he can come and put the girls' champion over. And speaking of the girls' champion for the women's title, whichever one of the women's titles that Mercedes doesn't have, it was Maria May and Toni Storm. And again, the dramatic return to, Maria, where's Maria from?
You mean Mariah?
Yeah, well, you say Maria, I say Mariah. I wish they'd called the whole thing off.
Her name's Mariah. I think she's from England.
So she's got an accent too. So but Toni Storm is the hometown girl here.
Let me just double check. Yeah, she's from London, England.
Well, there you go. So you got Queensland versus England. But, and I do mean the word but, during Maria's entrance, who comes out after she gets in the ring but Luther in a bellhop costume comes out of the stands and gestures grandly and flabbily toward the video screen for Tony's big entrance. They flew Luther to Australia, mugged an organ grinder, stripped his monkey, and put the outfit on Luther. But they can't take a ring over or bring any of the major stars of wrestling. But Luther, you think they had to buy that fat ass 2 seats on the plane?
I don't know.
I'll let you think of a better fucking retort to that.
I have no retort.
Oh, come on, or something.
I don't have any Luther retorts. He's beyond retort.
Beyond retorting?
Yes, he's beyond retorting.
We're doing the retorting on Luther.
Jericho's retorted friend Luther was on the show.
Oh, that's right. He's another one of the Winnipeg. You got the Cucamonga Clique and the Winnipeg Warriors. And so then Tony Storm entered in black and white. And it's better than Mercedes and Harley, but what wouldn't be? But they want Tony to win. And up to this point, Stacey, I think that's where she got up, because she said, you wouldn't have aired any of this. I was like, because I was complaining about the finish of the last match. Tony Storm wasn't bad until this gimmick. Remember, we liked Tony Storm. She was a good wrestler with a seemingly bubbly personality. But then she went Hollywood and got this bald fat fuck from Winnipeg to be her Eric von Stroheim, and this whole goddamn... It had nothing to do with All About Eve. Come to find out. Watch the goddamn movie, people, and compare All About Eve to anything they've done here. And then she's got amnesia. And then I'm so tired of amateur cartoon wrestling that I don't care whether this match was any good or not. Tony gave her 6 German suplexes and beat her up on the floor, and 3 ass to faces and a pile driver. And then Maria hit 2 Death Valley drivers and got a 2 count. Then they had a girly slap fight. So they followed up pile drivers and Death Valley drivers with a slap fight. And then the weirdest finish I've ever seen. Tony Storm hits a pile driver on Maria. Maria rolls to the floor so she can't be covered because she's injured. And then rolls back in and gives Tony Storm a pile driver. And then gets up and is going to pick Tony Storm up. And Tony Storm, instead of small packaging her out of a pickup attempt, stood straight up for a second, looking like she was going to pick her up and body slam her, and then small packaged her there. 1, 2, 3. So they each traded pile drivers within 45 seconds of the finish that they forgot about, and then the finish was a small package. Help me.
New world champion. Once again, world champion.
That wasn't the help I was looking for.
It's not about the help you're looking for. It's about the help Tony needs. Tony Khan, that is, not Tony. Not Timeless Tony.
Well, there's too many Tonys. See, Tony. It's too many. Needs to be just one, even if they do spell them differently. You got a Y, you got an I, you got an E.
I just don't...
You say it the same way.
I don't understand the idea that you could fly over all these people. Luther was flown over. Tony Schiavone. I guess you needed a commentator, but that's who they chose. All these people, and they didn't bring a ring. They couldn't just bring their ring.
Well, now, in all fairness, again, you can't just buy a fucking ticket on Delta for,
I'm not
like
saying
flight
that.
2472 to fucking Brisbane in first class for the ring. You have to get a cargo
plane. You'd have to be a billionaire able to rent a cargo plane.
Well,
exactly.
But again, that's what I'm saying. He spends the money on entrance music and talent scouts and miscellaneous, falderall for his cast of merry pranksters. But I don't understand why they didn't get... That's a big gate. Didn't they want to see the Hurt Syndicate? Why are the rosters still somewhat separate on Collision and Rampage now that Punk is not there to beat up any of the Bucks' childhood friends? Why can't all the stars appear on all the programs? It might help their ratings.
Well, Jim, before we wrap up our look at AEW's Australian vacation, here are the results for the Ring of Honor show we did not watch.
Uh-oh.
Bandito and the Outrunners.
He's back!
Defeated Big Bill, Brian Keith, and Chris Jericho. Ring of Honor Pure Champion Lee Moriarty defeated Robbie Eagles.
Ooh.
Mark Davis defeated Tommy Knight. The Ring of Honor World Tag Team Champions, the Sons of Texas, defeated the MXM Collection.
Ooh.
And finally, for the Ring of Honor Women's World Championship, Athena defeated Alex Windsor.
Ooh. I thought he was
Wasn't
one
that
of Dory
Dory
Funk
Funk's-
Jr.'s
Yeah.
trainees, Alex Windsor.
It must be, he just died a couple of years ago, too. It must be a different, well, it's in the women's division. I assume it's a different person, or Alex.
Well, either that or, he decided to make the change. We could all support that. So they just messed up on part of the advertising because they had promised Australia a veritable who's who of professional wrestling, and instead what they meant was a veritable who's that of professional wrestling.
Well, that was AEW's Australia Grand Slam. We shall see what happens if they return to Arthur Ashe and what that is, and if they ever go back to Australia and what ring they use. But Jim,
Yes.
would you like to put money down? Do you think AEW will return to Australia next year, yes or no?
I have a feeling who runs Australia? Is that a president or a prime minister? Or whatever the case, I have a feeling that the head honchos down there in Australia have already filed paperwork to ban AEW from appearing on their soil as unsavory elements. But folks, if you want to place a bet on it, I bet I know where you can go. See what I did there? Because our friends over at DraftKings Casino, well, they play all kinds of games and take all kinds of names and give out all kinds of winnings and all kinds of prizes, and you could be part of it. If the slots are spinning, you could be winning.
They take all kinds of names? What did you say?
Well, I don't know, but if the slots are spinning, you could be winning. And if you're losing, it might be because you're boozing. Do not drink and gamble, folks. Head over to DraftKings Casino and play the classics you know and love, or try something new with DraftKings' exclusive games. Now, you might know how to play poker or mahjong or possibly backgammon or any of these other fancy Dan casino games, but DraftKings has exclusive games. That means they've made them up. And that means that they made up the rules.
No,
and that means that if you win,
what?
well, they can just say, no.
No.
We made up the rules.
No.
And you didn't win.
No. I'm saying no. They're not going to say no. No, none of this is going to happen. They're not making up the games and making up the rules. No.
Well, they're making up the winners.
No, they're not making up anything. They are looking at the results, honoring the results, and looking for more people who want positive results.
And they're making the payoffs to those people, right?
Of course. That's a guarantee.
Well, somebody's going to get paid. That's pretty much guaranteed. Folks, new players that give DraftKings Casino a spin can get 200 casino spins on a featured game. Now, let me say that again, since I have no idea what they're talking about. New players that give DraftKings Casino a spin can get 200 casino spins on a featured game. You just sign up with the code Cornette and wager a minimum of $5 to receive 200 casino spins on a featured game. Now, this is, as soon as you walk in the front door of the casino, you're going to see a guy that looks somewhat like Tom Renesto with a pencil-thin mustache and very greasy, balding hair sitting there, and he's going to let you spin a little apparatus that he's got, and you get to do that 200 times.
That isn't it, but now that I think about it, we never realized that Vince lady, we never realized that Vince McMahon was going for the Tom Renesto look.
You know, there was an element of that, except Vince didn't get the big pot belly. But anyway, folks, if you want those 200 casino spins, and you better get started. It's going to take you some time to spin some shit that many times. Just sign up with the code Cornette at DraftKings Casino. That's Cornette, Cornette, and wager a minimum of $5 to get the 200 casino spins on the featured game. Only on DraftKings Casino, where the crown is indeed once and always yours.
That's right. And in fact, on that topic, we have a very special message just for you.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. 21 and over. Physically present in Michigan, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, West Virginia only. Void in Connecticut and Ontario. Eligibility restrictions apply. New customers only. Non-withdrawable casino spins valid for featured game only and expire in 168 hours. See terms at casino.draftkings.com/promos. Ends March 16th, 2025 at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time.
Well, that's specific. The crown is yours.
Very, very specific, very precise even. And that's Greenwich Mean Time, by the way.
The crown is yours with DraftKings. Or DK
and the
Casino.
show is yours with Drive-Thru.